The key felt impossibly heavy in my palm. I stood in the marble lobby of our building, my building now, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as my husband of 7 years pressed the intercom button for the third time. His finger jabbed at it with a rising desperation, the kind of frantic energy that comes when reality hasn't yet caught up with consequence. The intercom on the wall beside me remained silent, its light blinking with each buzz. I didn't move toward it. From the 12th floor, through this flawless pane of glass, I had watched him arrive in a taxi 20 minutes ago. No Porsche. That was the first thing he would have noticed. He'd stood on the curb for a full minute, staring at the empty space in the residence parking garage, even raising a hand to his head in that universal gesture of bewilderment. Then he'd grabbed his duffel bag, the leather one I'd bought him for our 5th anniversary, and strode toward the entrance with the easy confidence of a man who has never imagined his foundation could crumble. Now, that confidence was fracturing. His phone was pressed to his ear. My phone vibrated in my pocket for the 7th time in 3 minutes. I pulled it out and saw his name, husband, not his actual name, which he no longer was flashing on the screen. I'd changed it that morning, sitting in my lawyer's office right after signing the papers that changed everything else. The intercom buzzed again, longer this time. Through the glass, I saw John, our concierge, my concierge, speaking to him. John's posture was apologetic but firm, his hands raised in that universal gesture. Sorry, there's nothing I can do. He was following my instructions exactly. I had spoken with him that morning, and with building management, with everyone who needed to know. My husband's face was changing. I watched it happen in real time, even from this distance. The confusion curdled into something sharper. His jaw tightened, his shoulders squared. He was saying something to John, gesturing toward the elevators, toward the home he'd left 3 days ago, the home he believed he would be returning to, as always. My phone buzzed again, then again. Texts were coming through now, one after another. I didn't need to read them to know what they said. Where are you? What's going on? Why won't they let me in? Call me back. I remembered a dinner party 6 weeks ago. The candlelight reflecting in crystal wine glasses, the way his eyes lit up when he spoke about her. It was the specific timbre of his voice as he said the words that detonated everything I had built my life on. I remembered what I found afterward. The emails, the bank statements, the truth that had been living in my home, sleeping in my bed, eating at my table. I remembered the marriage I had poured everything into, my youth, my trust, my money, my future. And I remembered the woman I was before that dinner, before I knew. Before I decided that some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness, they deserve precision. My husband was yelling now. I couldn't hear him through the thick glass, but I could see his mouth move, his free hand chopping the air in sharp, aggressive motions. John took a small step back, and I made a mental note to tip him generously for this. Another concierge, David, the evening shift, came to stand beside him. They were handling it exactly as I'd instructed. Call security if he becomes aggressive. Do not engage beyond the script. I'm sorry, sir, but you are no longer listed as a resident or an authorized guest at this address. I turned from the window and walked toward the elevator. My heels clicked a steady, measured rhythm on the marble, a tempo that matched my own heartbeat. Slow, calm, controlled. Behind me, the buzzing stopped, then started again. My phone continued its desperate vibration. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the penthouse. As the doors slid shut, I caught one last glimpse of the lobby, of the intercom light still flashing red. The elevator began its smooth ascent, and I closed my eyes. This wasn't the end of the story. This was the place where I took back everything he thought he could take from me. But to understand how I got here, standing in this elevator, my husband locked out of the home he thought was partly his life about to unravel in ways he couldn't yet imagine, you need to understand where it began. You need to understand the dinner, and you need to understand that the woman who walked into that restaurant 6 weeks ago died at that table. The woman in this elevator was someone else entirely, someone he never should have created. I met him on a Tuesday. The detail is important, because I've always been suspicious of grand romantic beginnings, of the cinematic meet-cutes people construct in retrospect, polishing mundane moments until they shine like fate. Ours was a Tuesday afternoon at a professional development seminar. We both reached for the same stale croissant during a coffee break. Mundane, forgettable, except he smiled at me, this slow, unfolding smile that made his whole face go warm, and said, "I think the universe is telling us we have the same taste in mediocre pastries." I laughed. A real laugh. Not the polite titter you give strangers, but a genuine bark of amusement that caught me off guard. At 31, I had been through enough disappointing dates and lukewarm relationships to have developed a thick layer of cynicism around anything resembling romance. But something about his self-deprecation, about the way he immediately broke the croissant in half and offered me the larger piece, made me think, maybe this could be different. We talked through the rest of the break. Then we skipped the next session and kept talking over coffee at a coffee shop next door. Then dinner. Then he walked me to my car. And somewhere between the parking garage elevator and my driver's side door, he asked for my number with a sweet sort of nervousness that seemed at odds with his confident exterior. "I know we just met," he said, hands shoved in his pockets, "but I have this feeling that if I let you drive away without getting a way to contact you, I'm going to be kicking myself for the next month." I gave him my number. That was 8 years ago. I'm telling you this because you have to understand that I loved him. Deeply, completely, with the kind of total vulnerability that only comes when you decide someone is safe, when you look at a person and think, "Yes, I choose you, and I trust you with the most fragile parts of myself." Our romance was a steady build. He was a consultant at a mid-sized marketing firm, ambitious and charming, the type of man who remembered the small details about your day and sent you articles he thought you'd find interesting. I was a real estate attorney, practical and cautious, the type who read every contract twice and never made decisions on impulse except with him. When he proposed 10 months later on a random Sunday morning while we were making breakfast, with no ring yet, just him suddenly putting down the spatula and saying, "I don't want to wait anymore. Marry me?" I said yes before my brain could catch up. We were married 4 months later in a small ceremony that felt perfect because it was ours. His family flew in, my mother cried. It was all exactly as it was supposed to be. The cracks came later. The cracks always do. But first, there were 3 good years, maybe 4 if I'm being generous with my memories. We bought a small condo together. I made partner at my firm. He got a promotion. We talked about children in that vague, someday way that couples do when they're still enjoying being just the two of them. We traveled Barcelona, Tokyo, a road trip through Ireland where it rained every single day, and we laughed about it. We fought. We made up. I thought we were building something. I didn't realize I was the only one holding the blueprints. The money came into my life when I was 36. An inheritance from my father's aunt, a woman I barely knew but who had apparently followed my career with quiet pride. She left me everything: her estate, her investment portfolio, her properties. It was substantial, life-altering money, the kind that changes your entire paradigm of what is possible. $3 million after taxes. I remember sitting in the probate attorney's office, staring at the document and feeling like I was looking at a number from someone else's life. My husband was with me. He held my hand through the reading of the will, rubbed my back when I cried unexpectedly, not from grief, but from the overwhelming strangeness of it all. "What do you want to do with it?" he asked me that evening, both of us still processing. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Invest most of it, I guess. Maybe we can finally buy a real home, something that's really ours, not a condo with paper-thin walls." His eyes lit up. "A house. Our house," I corrected. "For us. For our future." We made love that night with a tenderness that felt like a renewal, like we were reconnecting with something we'd let drift. In the afterglow, with his arm around me, he whispered into my hair, "We're going to build something amazing. I can feel it." I believed him. God, I believed him. I was careful with the money. It was in my nature to be careful, and my professional life had taught me to be prudent with assets. I consulted with financial advisors, tax lawyers, investment specialists. I set up trusts and accounts and structured everything meticulously to maximize growth while minimizing risk. The home was the first big purchase. We found it together. a beautiful 4-bedroom condo in a leafy, affluent neighborhood with good schools, even though we didn't have kids yet. Hardwood floors and a chef's kitchen, a sprawling terrace with views of the city. It was perfect. I bought it in my name. Not because I didn't trust him, not consciously, but because the money was mine, and I was a lawyer, and I knew the statistics. I knew that protecting your assets wasn't about love, it was about being smart. My colleagues all gave the same advice. Keep the inheritance separate. Don't commingle the funds. It's not romantic, but it's practical. At the time, he didn't seem to mind. Whatever you're comfortable with, he said, signing the paperwork that affirmed he had no ownership claim to the property. It's your money. I get it. We moved in on a Saturday in May. I remember because the lilacs on the building's terrace were in bloom, and their scent filled every room as we brought in boxes. We christened every room that day, dancing in the empty living room, ordering takeout and eating on the kitchen floor, making love in our bedroom before we'd even assembled the bed frame. It was our home, our future, the foundation for everything we were building together. I renovated it carefully over the next year, updated the bathrooms, refinished the floors, and modernized the kitchen. I used my inheritance for all of it, keeping meticulous records. My money, my investment. He contributed to the monthly utilities, the groceries, the daily expenses. But the home was mine. I thought I was being smart. I didn't realize I was building my own lifeboat. His career had stalled for a while, not failing, but plateauing in that way that happens to people in their late 30s who haven't broken through to the next level. While I was making partner and managing high-profile real estate deals, he was still at the same firm, doing the same job, watching younger colleagues get promoted past him. It created a tension between us that we never named aloud. He started making comments, small ones at first. Must be nice to have a safety net. When I mentioned my investment portfolio. Some of us have to work for everything we have. When I bought myself a new car with my bonus, little jabs that he delivered with a smile, as if they were jokes, but they landed with a heavy thud. I told myself he was just stressed, insecure, going through something. I tried to be supportive, offered to help with his resume, to use my professional network to introduce him to people who could help his career. He sometimes accepted, sometimes bristled. I don't need you to rescue me, he snapped once when I suggested he talk to a headhunter I knew. I'm not trying to rescue you, I said, taken aback. I'm trying to help. Same thing. I didn't push it. I was learning there were topics that made him defensive, and his career was chief among them. So I backed off, gave him space, focused on my own work, and tried to make our home a place where he could feel successful, valued, needed. I became very good at making him feel big. I didn't notice I was making myself smaller. Looking back, from the other side of everything that happened, I can see the pattern forming, the way he would withdraw when I landed a new client, the way his compliments would come with a caveat. That's great, honey, though I'm sure half of success is just being in the right place at the right time. The way he would sometimes introduce me at parties as my wife, the lawyer, with just enough emphasis on the article to make it sound like a category, not an accomplishment, but I didn't see it at the time. Or maybe I did, and I told myself I was being too sensitive. Maybe I was too busy, too focused on my own things, too determined to believe in the marriage I had committed to. Maybe I didn't want to see that the foundation I thought we were building together, I was actually building alone, while he stood off to the side, watching with a growing resentment. The 7-year mark came and went. We didn't celebrate. We both said we were too busy, though we used to make time for anniversaries. He started traveling more for work. I was consumed by a complex commercial real estate deal that was eating up 80 hours of my week. We were two people living in the same beautiful home, sleeping in the same bed, but somehow occupying entirely different lives. We need to take a vacation, I said one night, as we were both eating separate meals at different times, me at the kitchen island with my laptop, him on the sofa with his phone. When this deal settles, just the two of us, maybe that B&B in Napa we always talked about. Sure, he said, not looking up. Sounds good. We never booked it. And then there was the dinner party, the invitation that would detonate everything I knew about my marriage, my husband, and the life I was living. the invitation I almost didn't accept. The restaurant was the kind of place where the lighting was engineered to make everyone look beautiful, and the prices were absent from the menu. I dressed carefully that night, the way you do when you know you'll be in a room full of people who size you up in the first 3 seconds. A dark blue silk dress, body skimming but not tight. Understated jewelry. Hair styled to look effortless, but that had taken 20 minutes. My reflection in the hall mirror before we left showed a woman who looked successful and elegant. Put together, I didn't realize I was dressing for my own funeral. The dinner was hosted by Kyle and Paige Sorensen, a couple my husband knew from early in his career. Kyle was now a senior VP at some tech company with a name that was all lowercase and implied innovation. Paige was in PR, the type of woman who calls everyone darling and makes you feel both welcome and assessed. "We should definitely go," my husband had said when the invitation arrived. "Kyle could have some contacts for me, and Paige knows everyone." So I cleared my calendar, rescheduled a client meeting, and put on my armor of silk and civility. The restaurant was downtown, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, with that industrial chic aesthetic that costs a fortune to look unfinished. We were directed to a private dining room in the back, where a long table was set for 12. Candles flickered down the center, the wine glasses catching the light. It was beautiful, in the calculated way expensive things are. The other guests were already mingling, holding cocktails and performing the social dance of professionals at a networking event disguised as a friendly gathering. I recognized a few faces, people from my husband's industry I'd met at previous functions. And then I saw her. She was standing by the window, laughing at something Kyle was saying. Even before my husband's entire body tensed beside me, I knew. The way you sometimes just know things, an instinct that sinks into your bones and bypasses rational thought. It was Claire, the ex-girlfriend, the one from before me. The relationship that ended, according to the scant details he'd shared early in our relationship, because the timing was wrong and they wanted different things. Ancient history, I had thought. Everyone has an ex. It meant nothing, except the way he was looking at her now meant something. His hand on the small of my back went still, not pulling away, just stopping, as if all the electricity in his body had momentarily rerouted elsewhere. I felt it, the shift, the sudden absence of his attention, though he was still physically beside me. "You didn't mention she would be here," I said quietly. "I didn't know." His voice was strange, tight. Paige swooped in then, all air kisses and perfume, pulling us into the room and making introductions. "You remember Claire, don't you?" she said to my husband, with the kind of casual cruelty women like Paige specialize in. "She's just moved back to the city. Isn't it wonderful? Just like a reunion." "Wonderful," I echoed, my professional smile locking into place. Claire turned to us, and I got my first clear look at her. She was beautiful, but not in a conventional way, not in the way magazines or movies teach you to recognize. It was something more unsettling. There was an almost ethereal quality to her pale skin, dark eyes, a kind of stillness that commanded attention. Her dress was simple, black, understated, which somehow made every other woman in the room look like they were trying too hard. "Hello," she said, her voice low, a little husky. "You must be the wife. I've heard wonderful things." "All lies, I'm sure," I said, with a lightness I didn't feel. She laughed. "From my husband? No." We moved to the table. The universe, or Paige's seating chart, which was the same thing, had placed Claire directly across from us, slightly to my husband's left. A perfect line of sight. I was to his right. I watched him arrange his napkin in his lap with a little too much focus. The first course was served. Conversation flowed around the table, that specific mix of shop talk and personal anecdotes that happens at these dinners. I participated where appropriate, asked the right questions, laughed at the right moments, but my awareness was hyper-focused on my husband beside me. He was different, alive, in a way I hadn't seen him in months, maybe years. He was funny, charming, leaning forward when he spoke, his eyes alight. He was the man I had met 8 years ago at that conference, the one who had made me laugh over a stale croissant, and all of that energy was being directed across the table. "So, Claire," Kyle was saying, "tell everyone about your new project. It's fascinating stuff." She demurred modestly but was eventually coaxed into describing her work, something in sustainable architecture, designing eco-friendly buildings for developing nations. It was impressive, genuinely so. She spoke with passion and intelligence, and I found myself understanding why the room tilted toward her when she spoke. "That's incredible," my husband said, and there was a note in his voice I couldn't quite place. Pride, awe, something else. "It's meaningful work," Claire said, looking at him. "I realized a long time ago that life's too short to do things that don't matter. You taught me that, by the way." The table gave a collective, "Ah." I took a large sip of wine. The conversation moved on. More courses appeared. The wine flowed freely and slowly, stealthily. I watched my husband fall back in love with his ex-girlfriend in real time while sitting next to his wife. It wasn't overt. He didn't touch her. He didn't ignore me. But there was an energy between them, a current that anyone paying attention could feel. They had inside jokes, shared references, the shorthand that comes from intimate history. "Remember that time in Costa Rica?" Claire said at one point, laughing. "With the monkey." My husband actually threw his head back and laughed, a full-body expression of delight I had almost forgotten he was capable of. Oh God, I blocked that out. The trauma was too great. Everyone was charmed by this, clamoring for the story, which they told in tandem, finishing each other's sentences, a perfectly choreographed duet of shared memory. It was a funny story. I laughed along with everyone else. I didn't know they had gone to Costa Rica together. He'd never mentioned it. But why would he have? It was before me. Ancient history. Except it didn't feel ancient. Not the way he was looking at her. The main course arrived, some perfectly cooked fish I couldn't taste. The conversation had splintered into smaller groups. Paige was now talking to me about a charity gala she was organizing, and I was responding on autopilot, tracking the conversation happening to my left. My husband was asking Claire about her life, where she'd been, what she'd been doing. "I spent the last 5 years abroad," she was saying, "working on projects in South America, then Southeast Asia." She'd been engaged, briefly. It hadn't worked out. "He was a good man," she said, with a small, sad smile. "But not the one, you know? I guess I've always had a very specific idea of what I was looking for." Her eyes flickered to my husband for a split second as she said it. Barely a glance, but I saw it, and so did he. "Well," Kyle said, raising his glass, "we're glad you're back. The city was duller without you." We all drank to that. My hand was steady on the crystal stem. My face was a mask of pleasant agreement. Inside, something was shifting, a tectonic movement for which I had no words yet. Dessert came. The table was louder now, multiple conversations overlapping, people loosened by wine and food and the late hour. I was talking to someone's husband about zoning laws, a discussion I could have in my sleep, and then I heard it. My husband's voice, not loud, but clear in a momentary lull in the surrounding chatter. "You know, you've only gotten more beautiful with age. It's not fair to the rest of us mortals." The table laughed. Someone, Paige, I think said something about charm, but I had stopped breathing. He was looking at Claire when he said it, directly at her, with an expression of such open admiration, such undisguised appreciation, that it felt like a punch to the chest while sitting down. Claire smiled. "You were always a flatterer." "I'm serious," he said, and he was. I could hear it in his voice. "Some people get older. You just distill, become more yourself." "Careful," Claire said, and her eyes were glittering. "Your wife might get jealous." Every head turned to me. The moment stretched. I could feel my face, the smile that was still there from my previous conversation, now frozen in place like a mask that no longer fit. Everyone was waiting for me to react, to say something witty or graceful or unbothered. My husband's hand found my knee under the table, a gentle, reassuring squeeze. "It's just a joke, just a compliment between old friends. Don't be that wife. Don't be insecure or jealous or small." I put my hand on top of his and squeezed back. Then I looked at Claire and said, with perfect lightness, "Oh, I'm secure enough to admit when my husband's telling the truth. You look absolutely stunning." More laughter. The moment passed. The conversation moved on. His hand left my knee. The rest of the dinner was a blur. We said our goodbyes, made promises to get together soon that I knew would never happen. I hugged Paige and thanked her for a lovely evening. I even hugged Claire. Two women, embracing briefly, while my husband watched. "It was so nice to finally meet you," she whispered in my ear. "He's lucky to have you." The words were right, the delivery was perfect, but they landed like a threat. We walked to the car in silence. My husband drove. I stared out the window at the passing city lights, feeling like I was underwater, everything muted and distant. "That was nice," he finally said. His voice was casual. "Good food. Hope it wasn't weird that Claire was there." "Should it have been?" "No, of course not. Just, exes can be awkward." I turned to look at him. His profile was lit intermittently by the streetlights, familiar and suddenly alien. "You told her she was beautiful." "What? Oh," he shrugged, eyes on the road. "I was just being polite. She's been through a lot." "You said she was more beautiful than she used to be." "Did I?" He sounded genuinely unsure, which was somehow worse. That he could say something that had seared itself into my memory and not even recall the exact words. "I guess I was just trying to be friendly. You know how it is at those things." I did know. I knew about professional pleasantries and social lubricant and the meaningless compliments that smooth over a gathering. This hadn't been that. But I also knew that if I pushed, if I made it into something, then I would be the problem. The insecure wife, the jealous woman who can't handle her husband being polite to an ex. So I said nothing. We drove the rest of the way home in silence, went through our nightly rituals. He fell asleep almost immediately, his breathing deep and even beside me. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner in my mind. His face when he first saw her, the light in his eyes when he spoke to her, the way he looked at her when he called her beautiful. Really looked, the way you look at something precious, the way he hadn't looked at me in years. Something had cracked inside me during that dinner. A space had been created where questions could grow. And as I lay there in the dark, listening to my husband sleep peacefully beside me, those questions began to take root. Who was this man I married? What was this life I had built? And why did I suddenly feel like a stranger in my own home? I didn't have the answers yet, but I was about to start looking for them, and what I would find would change everything. I didn't confront him the next morning, or the morning after. I watched. It's amazing what you notice when you're really paying attention. All the little things that had been happening on the periphery of my awareness suddenly snapped into focus, like adjusting a lens from blurry to sharp. He was on his phone more. Not a lot more, he'd always been attached to it, but there was a quality to the way he held it now, protective, angled slightly away. And he took it with him everywhere, into the bathroom, to the kitchen, for a glass of water, to go check the mail. "Everything okay?" I asked one evening, 3 days after the dinner, when he got up from the sofa for the 4th time to check a notification. "Yeah, just work stuff." But he was smiling as he typed, the soft, private smile of someone engaged in a conversation they're enjoying. Work didn't make him smile like that. I started noticing other details. The way he started dressing better in the mornings, even on days he worked from home. A new cologne I hadn't bought him. A sudden interest in hitting the gym, something he'd abandoned 2 years ago. "You're looking good," I said one morning. And I meant it. He did look good, energized, alive, and it should have made me happy. "Thanks," he said, kissing my cheek on his way out the door. "Just trying to take better care of myself." For her, I didn't say. "You're doing it for her." But I didn't know that yet, not for sure. And I have always been a person who needs proof, concrete facts, before making an accusation. It's the lawyer in me. Suspicion isn't evidence. A gut feeling isn't a case. So I started gathering evidence. It began small. I paid attention to his patterns. He used to be casual with his phone, leaving it on the counter while he showered, on the nightstand while he slept. But now, it was always face down, always locked. He'd changed the passcode. I noticed when I went to use it to call my own misplaced phone, something I'd done 100 times before. "What's your new code?" I asked casually. A microsecond of hesitation. "Oh, I changed it for security. Here, what do you need?" He unlocked it himself and handed it to me, then stood there while I called my phone. When I found it and hung up, he immediately took his phone back. That's when I knew not what, but that there was a what. I could have asked him directly. I probably should have. A healthier version of me, in a healthier marriage, would have said, I feel like we're disconnected. Something is wrong. Can we talk? But I was afraid of the answer. Or maybe I was afraid he would lie. Or worse, that he would tell the truth and I would have to deal with it before I was ready. So instead, I did what I do best. I investigated. The phone bill was easy. We were on a family plan, and I had the account access. I downloaded the records for the past month and started combing through the call log. There were the usual numbers: work colleagues, his mother, and then there was one number that appeared with increasing frequency, especially in the evenings and late at night. 30-minute calls, 45-minute calls, while he was supposedly working in his home office and I was in bed reading, as we lived our separate lives under one roof. I could have called the number. Part of me wanted to, but I already knew whose voice would answer. Instead, I checked our credit card statements. Another joint account, one we used for household expenses and daily purchases. I had the online access. I usually paid the bills anyway. There were charges I didn't recognize. Flowers, sent 3 weeks ago. I hadn't received flowers. A restaurant I'd never been to, on a Tuesday when he said he was working late. Another restaurant, a wine bar, a coffee shop, in a neighborhood on the other side of town. Each charge was small enough to be unnoticeable on its own, but together they painted a picture I didn't want to see. I sat at my desk in our home office, my office, in the house I bought, and looked at the spreadsheet I'd created. The calls, the texts, I couldn't see the content, but I could see the volume, the charges, a timeline of betrayal, laid out in data points. My hands were shaking. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet of the room. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window. Dust motes floated in the golden light. Everything looked normal, beautiful even. This home I had created, this life I had built. It was all just a set for a play I didn't realize I was in. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I never called in sick. My assistant sounded genuinely concerned. Are you okay? Do you need anything? Just a stomach bug, I lied. I'll be fine tomorrow. My husband had already left for work. I waited 30 minutes after he was gone, then I went into his office. It felt transgressive, going through his things. In 8 years of marriage, I had never snooped, never felt the need to. Trust was supposed to be the bedrock of what we had, but foundations crumble. His office was neat. He was meticulous about his workspace, desk organized, files labeled, books alphabetized. I started with the obvious places: desk drawers, file cabinet. Nothing incriminating, just work papers, old tax returns, warranties for electronics. Then I checked his briefcase, the one he took to the office every day but had somehow left at home today. In an inner pocket, tucked into the business card slot, I found a receipt, a hotel. From last week, the night he said he had a late client dinner. A charge for one room, for one night. Check-in time, 7 p.m. Checkout time, 11 p.m. 4 hours. I stood there in his office, holding the receipt in my hands. 4 hours. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding. 4 hours in a hotel room in the middle of our city, when his own home was a 20-minute drive away. The paper crinkled slightly in my hand. I smoothed it out, took a picture of it with my phone, and put it back, exactly where I found it. Then I sat down in his desk chair and tried to breathe through the thing that was tearing my chest apart. It wasn't shock. On some level, I had known since the dinner, maybe before. Some part of me had registered what was happening, even as my conscious mind refused to see it. It was grief. The death of the marriage I thought I had. The death of the man I thought I knew. The death of the future I had been working toward. I let myself cry for 10 minutes. I timed it, the way I had trained myself to do in my professional life when I needed to process something before getting back to work. 10 minutes to fall apart, then compartmentalize and move forward. When the timer on my phone went off, I wiped my face, went to the bathroom, washed my hands and splashed cold water on my eyes and looked at myself in the mirror. My face stared back, puffy and red, but familiar. I was still here. I was still me. And I was done being the woman who didn't know. I needed more information. The receipt proved he'd done something, but not precisely what, and I knew from my career that assumptions, even reasonable ones, could fall apart in court. I needed irrefutable proof. I needed to know the full scope of what I was dealing with. I went back to his office and searched more thoroughly. This time, I was methodical, checking every book for hidden papers, every file folder for something out of place. I found nothing else. Either he was being very careful, or the bulk of the affair existed digitally. His laptop was password protected, a different one than his phone. I tried a few obvious combinations, birthdays, our anniversary. Nothing worked. I wasn't a hacker. I couldn't get in without him knowing, but I knew someone who could. I sat on the floor of his office, my back against his desk, and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name, David Miller, a tech forensics expert I'd worked with on a digital fraud case last year. He was discreet, brilliant, and he owed me a favor. I called him. "Hey," he answered, surprised. "Long time no see. What's up?" "I need help," I said. "Personal, confidential." There was a pause. Then his voice changed, became professional. "What kind of help?" "I need to get access to someone's digital communications without their knowledge. I think my husband is having an affair. I need proof before I do anything." Another pause. Longer this time. "Are we talking legal or matrimonial?" "Matrimonial." "I'm a lawyer, David. I know how this works. I need to know what's happening. I'm not going to use it in court, but I need to know what I'm dealing with." I could hear him thinking, "Yeah, I can help. Do you have access to any of his devices?" "His laptop, but I don't have the password." "You don't need it. I can set you up with a program. You'll have to install it while he's not home. It'll take about 10 minutes. After that, it'll mirror everything, emails, texts, browser history, all of it, to a secure server you can access remotely. He'll never know it's there." My stomach churned. Is this legal? In your own home? On a device you co-own? It's a gray area, but probably defensible. Not admissible in court, but useful for understanding what you're up against. "To ever porten a covered staging." That's all I need to know. "I'll send you the details. Give me an hour." "David, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said quietly. "You might not like what you find." "I already don't like it," I said. "At least this way I'll know." The program arrived in my email 40 minutes later with detailed instructions. My husband wouldn't be home for hours. I had time. I followed David's instructions exactly, installing the software on my husband's laptop, sitting in his chair, in his space, violating his privacy in the exact same way he had violated our marriage. It felt like justice. It felt like a fall from grace. When it was done, I closed the laptop, left his office, and went to our bedroom. I lay on top of the covers and stared at the ceiling, the same ceiling I'd stared at in the nights after the dinner, and I waited. My phone would alert me when the program started capturing data. David said it might take a few hours for everything to sync. I had to be patient. Patience had never been my strong suit, but I was learning things about myself in these past few weeks. I was capable of things I had never imagined. Deception, surveillance, the kind of calculated calm that comes from knowing your life is ending and choosing to control exactly how it dies. My phone vibrated. A text from my husband. "How are you feeling? Need me to bring anything home?" The concerned husband. The attentive partner. I typed back, "Much better. See you tonight." And then I waited for the truth to reveal itself. The first email appeared in my mirrored inbox at 3:47 p.m. I was sitting in our living room, my own laptop on my lap, pretending to review work contracts. In reality, I had been refreshing the secure server David set up every 10 minutes for the past 2 hours, watching as the files slowly populated browser history, application data, and finally, emails. The most recent one was from his sent folder. The recipient was an email address I didn't recognize, but the subject line made my blood run cold. "Tonight." I clicked to open it. "Can't wait to see you. Same place. I'll bring the wine this time. You bring you. It's all I need." Him, my husband, flirting with... I scrolled up to see the entire email chain. Her replies were there too, syncing in real time as the program captured everything. "You're impossible. Same place, 7:30. And bring that Malbec you were talking about. I want to try the thing you get so excited about. Deal? Wear the blue dress. Bossy. I'll wear what I want. You'll wear the blue dress because you know how much I love you in it. And you like it when I love you. I felt the coffee rise in my throat. I carefully set the laptop aside, walked to the bathroom, and was sick. When there was nothing left, I rinsed my mouth, washed my face, and walked back to the living room. I picked up the laptop. I read it again. Then I scrolled further back. The emails went back weeks, months, long before the dinner party. The dinner party wasn't a beginning, it was a reunion. They had been communicating for at least 3 months, according to the earliest email in the chain. Her first message to him was simple: "I'm moving back to the city. Thought you should know." His reply, sent within the hour: "That's the best news I've heard in years. When can I see you?" I read every single email, watched their affair unfold in reverse, from today's easy plans to those first cautious messages that still had the sheen of plausible deniability. Just coffee. As friends. So great to catch up. We should do it again. And then the shift. The messages becoming longer, more personal. Him sharing how he felt stuck in his career, unappreciated at home. Her sympathizing, understanding, reminding him of the man he used to be. "You were always meant for more," she wrote. "I don't think she sees you the way I do. She sees a pay stub and a name on a tax return." He had replied, "You see me." I had to stop reading, put the laptop down, walk to the kitchen, pour a glass of water with trembling hands. She sees a pay stub. 7 years of marriage, of partnership, of building a life together, and this is what I was to him. I drank the water, poured another glass, forced myself to breathe. Then I went back and kept reading. The messages became more intimate, more longing, more sexual, though not explicit. Talk of stolen moments, of feeling alive again, of how this felt right in a way nothing else did. And then, 3 weeks ago, the hotel. "I can't keep doing this halfway," he had written. "I need all of you." "You have me," she replied. "You've always had me." The hotel receipt I'd found matched the date of that exchange. I sat with that knowledge, letting it settle into my bones. My husband had slept with his ex-girlfriend in a hotel downtown while I was at home, probably working late, completely unaware that my marriage had just died. The program was still sinking. Text messages started to come through now, hundreds of them, the mundane and the devastating all mixed together. "Thinking of you. Last night was everything. I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore." That last one stopped me. Until we don't have to hide anymore. I clicked on the thread, reading backward. "When are you going to tell her?" Claire had asked, 2 weeks ago. "I have to get the logistics sorted out first. The house is complicated." "The house or your feelings? The house is in her name. It's her inheritance. If we divorce, I walk away with nothing. You walk away with you. With us. Isn't that worth more than a property?" "Of course. It's just, I have to be smart about this. Let me handle it my way." There it was, in his own words, the truth of who I was to him, not a wife, not a partner. An obstacle between him and what he wanted, a financial complication to be navigated carefully. I thought of the documents he had signed when I bought the house, acknowledging it as my separate property. At the time, I thought I was protecting myself. I had no idea how right I was. More texts loaded. I watched them populate the screen with a detached curiosity, as if I were reading about someone else's life. They were planning not just an affair, but a future. Claire was looking at apartments, sending him listings. "For when you're free," she wrote, "think of it as our first place." He replied with heart emojis and promises. They talked about traveling together, about the life they would have, about how much better suited they were for each other than either of them was for their current situations. "She never really got me," he wrote. "I feel like I've just been going through the motions for the last few years." Then stop. "Life is too short to be with the wrong person." "Soon," he promised. "I just need to set things up right." I wondered what setting things up right meant. Was he planning to ask for alimony, to claim he had contributed to the household and deserved compensation? I pulled out my phone and texted my lawyer. Not one from my firm. This had to be personal and completely confidential. Jessica Thorne, a divorce specialist I'd referred clients to for years, the best in the city, need a consultation as soon as possible. Personal matter. How soon can you see me? The reply came back in 3 minutes. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. My office. Are you okay? I will be. I went back to the laptop. The program had finished its initial sync. I had access to everything now. Every email, every text, every photo, every browser search. I started going through the browser history, found the searches he'd been making. Divorce lawyer. How to claim spouse's assets. Alimony rights when wife earns more. He had been researching, planning, preparing to leave me, while figuring out how to take as much as he could with him. And all the while, he was coming home, kissing my cheek, asking about my day, sleeping in our bed. I checked the photo folder. There she was. Claire, dozens of pictures of them together. Coffee dates, dinners at restaurants, her in his car, laughing, him kissing her on the cheek. A selfie of them in bed, clothed, thankfully, but the intimacy was unmistakable. The photos were dated over the past 3 months. A visual timeline of everything I'd been too busy to notice. In one photo, she was wearing a necklace I didn't recognize, dainty, expensive looking. I cross-referenced the date with the credit card statements. There it was, a purchase at a jewelry store. $500. 2 weeks ago, I had thought it was for me, for our upcoming anniversary. Maybe an early birthday present. It was never for me. I created a folder on my own secure drive and began to organize everything. Screenshots of the email threads, the texts, the photos, the credit card statements, the phone records. I was building a case against my husband with the same meticulous attention I would give any legal file. Proof of the affair, documented. Proof of financial planning with intent to profit from a divorce, documented. A timeline of deceit, documented. By the time I was finished, it was 5:30 p.m. My husband would be home in an hour. Actually, later, since according to his texts, he was planning to meet Claire at 7:30, which meant he would need an excuse. I didn't have to wait long. At 6:15, my phone buzzed with a text from him. Got stuck on a last-minute work thing. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you. Love you. 2 words that used to mean everything. Now they were just sounds, meaningless noise to cover the truth. I replied, "No problem. I'll probably turn in early anyway." Still feeling a little off. "Feel better, babe." I wondered if he felt any guilt at all, or if the lying had become so routine it was just another task to check off a list. Text the wife, cover your tracks, go to the mistress. I had 3 hours before he would be home, maybe 4, depending on how long he stayed with her. I used the time to think. Not about whether to leave him. That decision had been made the moment I saw those emails. You can't unknow something like that. Can't unfeel that betrayal. The marriage was over, even if he didn't know it yet. I thought about how I could confront him tonight, when he walked in the door, throw the evidence in his face, scream, cry, demand answers to questions that no longer mattered. Or I could be smart. I was a real estate lawyer. I knew property law inside and out. I knew what was mine and what wasn't, what was protectable and what was vulnerable. And I knew that in a divorce, the person who plans wins. He had been planning, researching his rights, figuring out his strategy, all while keeping me in the dark. But he'd made one critical mistake. He underestimated me. The home was mine. Bought with my inheritance, titled in my name alone, with a clear paper trail showing separate ownership. He had signed the documents acknowledging that. No matter how good his lawyer was, he was not getting this house. Our cars were in our individual names. Mine was paid off. His had 2 years of lease payments left. Payments that came out of our joint account, which I could close. Our bank accounts were joint, except for my investment portfolio, which was entirely separate. I could remove my portion of the joint accounts, leave him his half, take mine, and shut the door. I thought about the timing. If I moved too fast, without proper legal counsel, I could make mistakes. But if I waited too long, he might make his move first. Tomorrow morning, I would meet with Jessica and form a legal strategy, and then I would execute it. But tonight Tonight, I needed to see it with my own eyes. I knew where they were meeting. The texts mentioned the same place, a wine bar in the arts district I'd never been to. It was probably their place, full of memories I wasn't a part of. I could go. I could watch them together. Some would say it was self-destructive, that I already had all the proof I needed. But I needed to see it, to witness the death of my marriage in real time, to burn it into my memory so that when he inevitably tried to gaslight me, to minimize it, to make me feel crazy for being hurt, I would have this. I would have the image of him with her, living the truth he had been hiding. I got dressed. Not as the version of myself he knew, not the professional lawyer or the put-together wife. I put on jeans, a plain black sweater, minimal makeup, pulled my hair back, and wore my glasses instead of contacts. I looked like a different person. I felt like a different person. At 7:15, I got in my car and drove downtown. The wine bar was called Vignette. Of course it was. It was tucked into a converted warehouse in the arts district, the kind of place with exposed ductwork and Edison bulbs and a curated selection of natural wines that cost $20 a glass. Through the large front windows, I could see the warm glow of the interior. People were clustered at small tables, laughing and talking in that animated way people do at the beginning of an evening, when they're still fresh, still hopeful about how the night might unfold. I parked across the street and 2 blocks down, far enough to be invisible, close enough to see. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. That surprised me. I had expected tremors, tears, some physical manifestation of the emotional earthquake happening inside me. But I felt calm, cold, almost as if I had stepped outside my own body and was watching this happen to someone else. Maybe this was shock, or maybe this is who I became when the worst had already happened. Not a woman who fell apart, but a woman who observed, documented, prepared. At 7:28, his car pulled up. The Porsche Cayenne he'd insisted on leasing 3 years ago, the one I privately thought was a cliché but supported anyway because it made him happy. He circled the block once, looking for parking, finally finding a spot 2 cars ahead of me. I slouched down in my seat, though it was unnecessary. He wasn't looking for me. He wasn't thinking about me at all. His thoughts were likely on her, on the evening ahead, on the life he was building in secret while our marriage quietly died of neglect and betrayal. He got out of the car, and I watched him check his reflection in the window, smooth his hair, adjust his collar. He was wearing the blue shirt I'd bought him for his birthday, the one I said brought out his eyes. He was wearing it for her. He walked into the bar with an easy confidence, a lightness in his step, the walk of a man going towards something he wanted. I waited 30 seconds, then got out of my car. The November air was sharp, cutting through my sweater. I'd left my coat in the car. Good. The cold was grounding, kept me sharp. I walked toward Vignette. My heart was pounding now, though my hands were still steady. Through the window, I could see him at a table in the back. She wasn't there yet. He was looking at his phone, smiling at something, probably a text from her, saying she was close. I couldn't go inside. Too risky. But the bar had a side patio. I could see it from the street. Heat lamps glowed in the evening dark, and the patio connected to the main room through open French doors. If I positioned myself right, I could see their table. I walked around to the patio entrance. A few people were seated at the outdoor tables, bundled in coats, determined to enjoy the ambiance despite the chill. I chose a corner table, partially obscured by a potted tree, ordered a glass of red wine from the server who appeared, and turned my chair so I could see through the doors, a perfect line of sight. At 7:35, Claire arrived. I saw her before he did, watched as she scanned the room, her face lighting up when she spotted him. She was wearing the blue dress, the one he'd told her to wear, and she looked beautiful. That same ethereal quality I'd noticed at the dinner party, enhanced by the warm lighting and the obvious joy on her face. She walked to his table. He stood up. They hugged, an embrace that lasted a fraction too long to be casual. When they pulled apart, he kept his hands on her waist for a moment, looking down at her with an expression I recognized. I had seen that expression before, years ago, when he looked at me. They sat down. A server appeared immediately. They were clearly regulars. They ordered without looking at the menus. When the server left, they leaned toward each other across the table, hands clasped, talking with the intensity of people who have too much to say and not enough time to say it. I picked up my glass and took a sip. I couldn't taste it. From my vantage point, I could see them clearly but couldn't hear their conversation. I could only watch, read the body language, fill in the blanks with my imagination, which was somehow worse than knowing. She laughed at something, he said, throwing her head back. Her hand reached across the table to touch his. He turned his palm up, caught her fingers, held them. Such a small gesture, meaningless to anyone else in the restaurant, devastating to me. The wine arrived at their table. He'd brought the Malbec, he promised. The server poured. They touched their glasses together, a silent toast, a sound I couldn't hear but could imagine. Crystal on crystal, a promise made in wine. They drank. His thumb was tracing circles on the back of her hand. I watched him be present with her in a way he hadn't been present with me in years, maybe ever. Leaning forward, engaged, alive, laughing. She said something, and he actually put a hand over his heart, mock-wounded, and she laughed even louder. They had their own jokes, a rhythm, a history that existed in a space I could never enter, no matter how many emails I read or texts I scrolled through. And that somehow hurt more than the physical betrayal, the knowledge that he had this whole other life, this whole other self, that he saved for her. The best parts of him, offered freely, while I got the leftovers. The tired, resentful, checked-out version that came home and scrolled through his phone and made me feel like I was demanding too much for wanting a conversation. My hand tightened on my wine glass. I forced myself to loosen my grip before it cracked. Their food came. They had ordered appetizers to share. I watched them eat off each other's plates with an easy, comfortable intimacy. The server came by, and they both smiled up at her with the warmth of people who are exactly where they want to be. At one point, Claire got up to use the restroom. He watched her walk away, his eyes following her across the room with open admiration. When she was gone, he pulled out his phone, typed something. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. A text from him. "This work thing is running longer than expected. Probably be home around 11. Sorry, babe." I stared at the message. At the casual lie, the reflexive deceit, the sorry that meant nothing. I typed back, "It's okay. Take your time." I watched him read my reply, watched him smile slightly and put his phone away, guilt-free, just as Claire returned to the table. She sat down, and he immediately reached for her hand again, said something that made her eyes soften. She whispered something back. I couldn't read lips, but it looked like "I love you." The stem of my wine glass bent slightly in my hand. I forced myself to loosen my grip before it broke. I should leave. I had all the proof I needed. There was no point in sitting here, torturing myself, except to add fresh wounds to an already mortal injury. But I couldn't move. I watched them finish their meal. Watched them order dessert, 1 plate, 2 forks. Watched them feed each other bites with the unself-conscious intimacy of people who had done this before, many times. I watched my husband be happy. And I understood, sitting there in the cold with my untouched wine, that this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness or a midlife crisis or any of the other narratives people use to soften the edges of betrayal. This was a choice he was making, over and over again. Every text, every email, every lie, every moment he could have stopped and didn't. He chose this. He chose her. And in doing so, he unchose me. The server brought them their check. He paid for it with our joint credit card. I noted with a bitter irony. Paid for his date with my money. They stood to leave. He helped her on with her coat, his hands lingering on her shoulders. They walked toward the exit together, and for a moment, I thought they would pass by the patio, right past me. But they turned the other way, toward the front door. I waited until they were outside, until I could see them through the window, walking toward his car. Watched him open the passenger door for her. Watched her stand on her toes to kiss him before she got in. A real kiss. Not long, but not casual. The kiss of people who intended to continue this later, somewhere private. A hotel, probably. The same one, or a new one. Another receipt. Another 4 hours he would steal from our marriage to give to her. His car pulled away from the curb. I watched the taillights disappear around the corner. It was only then that I realized I was crying. Not sobbing, just silent, steady tears running down my face in the cold night air. I wiped them away with the back of my hand and looked at my wine glass, still full. I hadn't had a sip since the first one. I left cash on the table, too much, but I didn't care, and walked back to my car. The drive home was automatic. I don't remember most of it. My body knew the way, muscle memory guiding me through the turns and traffic lights while my mind processed what I had seen. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the tears had stopped. By the time I unlocked the front door and stepped into our home, my home, I was transformed. The woman who had driven to that wine bar hoping she was wrong, hoping there was some explanation, hoping her marriage could be saved, that woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, colder, someone who understood that mercy is wasted on people who have already shown you who they are. I went to the bedroom, changed into pajamas, washed my face, went through all the motions of normalcy. Then I got into bed, set my alarm for 8 a.m., and went to sleep. I slept deeply, dreamlessly, for the first time in weeks. When I woke up to my husband's alarm, he still wasn't home. Jessica Thorne had the kind of office that was designed to be both calming and intimidating. Plush leather chairs, a mahogany desk, shelves lined with law books, and, more tellingly, awards for family law. On the wall behind her desk hung her credentials: Harvard Law, a clerkship for a federal judge, 30 years of experience. She didn't do consultations. She did tactical planning. "Tell me everything," she said as I sat down. I did. I showed her the emails, the texts, the photos, the credit card statements, the hotel receipt. I showed her the deed to the house, the title in my name, the paper trail of my inheritance, the waiver my husband had signed. She looked through it all with the focused attention of someone reading a battle plan, which I suppose it was. When she was done, she looked up at me. "How do you feel?" The question surprised me. Not "what do you want to do?" or "here are your options." "How do you feel?" "Angry," I said honestly. "Good. Angry is useful. Angry is actionable." She leaned back in her chair. "Here's what you need to understand. You are in a very strong position. The house is clearly your separate property. Your inheritance is protected. Based on those searches he was doing, he's planning to argue for some kind of financial stake, but he has no legal leg to stand on. What about alimony? Possible, but unlikely. You've been married 7 years, just under the threshold where long-term support becomes more common. You out-earn him. He's employed. Any alimony would be minimal and temporary." She paused. "Unless he quits his job before you file." I hadn't thought of that. Would he do that? People do desperate things in a divorce. If he's unemployed at the time of filing, he can make a stronger case for support. She tapped a pen on her desk, "which is why we need to move quickly and strategically." "Tell me how." For the next hour, Jessica laid out the plan. First, I was to secure all my separate assets, move money from our joint accounts, only my share, cleanly and documentably change the passwords on my individual accounts, and remove my name from any joint credit cards after paying my portion of the balance. Second, I was to secure the house, change the locks, which I had every legal right to do as the sole owner, and have his things packed and ready for removal. Third, I was to file for divorce before he did, to get ahead of the narrative, to control the process. "You need to understand something," Jessica said, her tone growing serious. "Once you start this process, there is no going back, and it will get ugly. He will feel blindsided. He may get angry. He may try to negotiate. He may make promises. You have to be absolutely certain this is what you want." I thought of the wine bar, of his hand on her hand, of the lies. "I'm certain. Then let's get to work." By noon, I had retained Jessica, signed the paperwork, and had a detailed checklist of actions to take. I sat in my car in her parking lot and called my bank. "I need to make some changes to my accounts," I told the representative. Within an hour, I had transferred my money out of our joint checking and savings accounts. I left his contributions. I had calculated it precisely, looking back over a year of statements. I only took what was mine, defensively. I closed our joint credit cards, paying off the full balance, my share and his. I didn't want any lingering financial ties. I called our insurance company and split the policy. I called the utility companies and had everything transferred solely into my name. By 3 p.m., I had methodically dismantled our shared financial life. Next, I called a locksmith. I need to have all the locks on my home changed today, if possible. We can have someone there by 5. Excellent. Then I called a moving company. I need someone's belongings packed and moved to a storage unit tomorrow morning. How quickly can you do it? They could have a team there by 9 a.m. I sat in my car in that parking lot, making phone calls and erasing my husband from my life with the efficiency I usually reserved for closing a real estate deal. It felt powerful. It felt right. At 4 p.m., I drove home. My husband's car wasn't there. According to the location tracking he'd forgotten to turn off on our family plan, he was at his office. His actual office this time, apparently. I walked through the house, room by room, looking at it with new eyes. It was mine, all of it. Every piece of furniture I had chosen, every paint color I had picked, every improvement I had funded. He had lived here, but he had never truly invested in it. Not financially, not emotionally. It had always been my house. Now, it would just be my home. The locksmith arrived at 5:15. By 6, I had new keys and the deep satisfaction of knowing my husband's key would no longer work in these locks. I ordered takeout, ate it at the kitchen island while reviewing the papers Jessica had sent over. The divorce petition was drafted, ready to be filed. I just had to sign it, and she would send it to the court in the morning. My phone vibrated. A text from my husband. Working late again. Don't wait up. I knew what working late meant now. Knew exactly where he was and with whom. I replied, okay. No, love you. No, see you later. Just an acknowledgement. He didn't seem to notice. At 9 p.m., I went into his office. I had already told the moving company to pack everything in this room, his desk, his files, his books, his precious, organized workspace. But first, I wanted to leave something for him. I drafted an email on my laptop. By the time you read this, you will have discovered your key no longer works. This is not a mistake. This home is my separate property, as you acknowledged in writing when I purchased it. You are no longer a welcome guest here. Your belongings will be packed and moved to a storage unit tomorrow. You will receive the address and access code via your attorney. I have filed for divorce. You will be served in the next few days. I know about Claire. I know about the affair. I know everything. Do not insult me by trying to deny or minimize it. Our joint accounts have been separated. I have taken only what belongs to me. Your portion remains in your individual account. Our credit cards have been closed. You are responsible for your own expenses going forward. Do not contact me directly. All communication should go through our attorneys. My attorney is Jessica Thorne of Thorne & Associates. I suggest you retain counsel immediately. This marriage is over. I read it 3 times, stripped out any emotion, any accusation, any room for argument, made it clean, factual, final. Then I saved it as a draft. I would send it tomorrow, after everything was in motion, after the locks were changed, his things packed, and the divorce papers filed, after there was no going back. I went to bed at 10 p.m. My husband still wasn't home. I checked the location tracker. He was at a hotel, the same one from the receipt. I turned off my phone and went to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, my husband was asleep beside me. He must have come in late, slipped into bed without waking me. The scent of her perfume was faint but present on his skin. I got up quietly, showered, and got dressed in a business suit, as if I were going to court, because in a way, I was. I was going to war. The moving company arrived at exactly 9 a.m. 3 men with boxes and dollies and an efficient, professional demeanor. Everything in the office, I told them, and his clothing from the bedroom closet. I'd marked which items were his that morning, while he was still asleep, placing small sticky notes on his suits, his shoes, his dresser. I made it easy for them. My husband emerged from the bedroom, bleary-eyed, confused. What's going on? Are you moving? You're moving, I said calmly. He stared at me. What do you mean, I'm moving? These men are packing your things. A storage unit has been rented in your name. You'll get the address and access code this afternoon. Is this a joke?" He looked at the movers, who were professionally ignoring our conversation and continuing their work. "Hey, stop. There's been a mistake." "There's no mistake," I said. "This is my home. I am asking you to leave." His face cycled through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, anger. "You can't just kick me out. I live here." "I can. This house is my separate property. You have no legal claim to it. Check with a lawyer if you don't believe me." "What the hell is going on?" His voice was rising now. "Did someone say something to you?" "This is about Claire," I said quietly. "About the affair you've been having for the last 3 months. About the hotel visits and the lies and the plans you've been making to leave me while figuring out how to take as much of my money as you could on your way out." "I know everything," I continued, my voice level. "The emails, the texts, the credit card charges. All of it. Do not insult me by trying to deny it." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. I'm filing for divorce. You'll be served in the next few days. Our finances have already been separated. Your things are being packed as we speak, and your key will no longer work in these locks." "You changed the locks?" Disbelief and fury warred in his tone. "You can't do that." "I already have." He took a step toward me, and I held up a hand. "Don't. The movers are witnesses. My lawyer has everything documented. If you want to make this harder than it has to be, you'll only be hurting yourself." "I live here," he repeated, as if saying it again would make it true. "You lived here," I said, past tense. "Now you need to figure out where you're going to live." "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, and for the first time he sounded small. "That is no longer my problem." I pulled the printed-out email from my pocket. I had decided to give it to him in person rather than send it. "This explains everything. Read it when you've calmed down, and get a lawyer. You're going to need one." I handed him the paper and walked away, back into my bedroom, now my room, and closed the door. Through the wood, I could hear him making phone calls. First to Claire, his voice low and urgent. Then to a lawyer, I assumed, his tone shifting to desperate and pleading. None of it mattered. By noon, the movers were done. His office was empty. His clothes were gone. The house felt bigger, cleaner, as if something heavy had been removed. I stood at the window and watched the truck pull away, carrying the physical remnants of my marriage to a storage unit I would never visit. My phone rang. It was Jessica. "The papers are filed," she said. "He'll be served tomorrow." "Thank you. How are you feeling?" I looked around my home, my space, my future, no longer entangled with someone who had betrayed me. "I'm good," I said, and I meant it. 6 weeks later, I was standing in the same marble lobby where this story began, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as my now ex-husband pressed the intercom button one last time before giving up. The divorce had been finalized that morning, fast, clean, exactly as Jessica predicted. He had tried to fight it, of course, hired a lawyer who made noise about his contributions to the household, about emotional distress, about the unfairness of being left with nothing, but the law was clear. The house was mine. The inheritance was mine. And after 7 years of marriage with our finances meticulously separated, he had no claim. He walked away with his personal belongings, his leased car with its remaining payments, and half of our minimal joint savings. Everything he brought into the marriage, he took out of it, nothing more. Claire had taken him in at first. I heard through mutual acquaintances, the ones who had quietly chosen my side once the story came out, that they had tried to make a go of it. The grand love affair, finally free to exist in the light of day. But apparently, a romance is different from a relationship. The thrill of secret meetings, stolen moments, and forbidden love doesn't translate well to the mundane reality of bills and responsibilities and the day-to-day routine of a real partnership. They lasted 5 weeks before she asked him to leave. Now he was living in a studio apartment across town, working the same job, driving the same car, probably wondering how his life had unraveled so quickly. I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt free. The home was still mine, but it felt different now. I had his office redone, turned it into a reading room with built-in bookshelves and a comfortable chair by the window. I repainted the bedroom, got new linens, made everything new. My career was flourishing. Without the emotional drain of a dying marriage, I had a new energy to invest in my work. I'd landed 2 major clients in the past month, handling cases that would have previously stressed me out with a calm confidence that surprised even me. I'd started running in the mornings, joined a book club, reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the years I was trying to save a marriage that was already gone. I was building a life. Not the one I had planned, not the future I had pictured when I said yes to that breakfast proposal 8 years ago, but mine. Entirely, completely mine. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about the woman I used to be. The one who walked into that fancy restaurant and sat across from her husband's ex-girlfriend, smiling through the pain of being compared and found wanting. That woman believed love meant holding on, that commitment meant enduring, that a good wife made herself smaller so her husband could feel bigger. That woman was gone. In her place was someone who understood that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And that the most powerful thing you can do when someone betrays you isn't to seek dramatic revenge or to make them suffer. It's to remove them from your life with the same careful precision you would use to remove a tumor. Completely, cleanly, permanently. I watched my ex-husband's figure recede down the sidewalk, his shoulders slumped, alone. Then I turned from the window, walked to the elevator, and rode up to my home. The doors closed behind me, and I smiled. Not because I had won, though I had, but because I realized the best revenge isn't making someone homeless or broke or miserable. It's building a life so full, so rich, so completely your own that their absence becomes an irrelevance. He thought he could use me as a safety net while he planned his future with someone else. Instead, he taught me I never needed one. And that lesson, however painful, had set me free. The elevator reached my floor. I stepped out into the hall, took out my new key, the only copy in existence, and unlocked my door. Inside, everything was exactly as I had left it. Quiet, calm, mine. I took off my shoes, poured myself a glass of wine, and walked to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, he was figuring out his next move, wondering what went wrong, maybe even telling himself a story where he was the victim. Let him. I had better things to do than think about a man who had already taken up too much of my time. I had a life to live, and it was going to be extraordinary.